everyone, and welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live video series. And joining me today to share the stories behind the 10 books that influenced her the most on her life path is Dr. Anita Sanchez. Dr. Sanchez is a powerful visionary business consultant of Mexican American and Aztec heritage who's woven her knowledge of indigenous wisdom, business, and science into her global consulting and training work with world and corporate leaders for more than 38 years. She's a member of the Transformational Leadership Council, the Pachamama Alliance, and Pioneers. And she is the best-selling author of The 4 Sacred Gifts, Indigenous Wisdom for Modern Times, in which she reveals the prophecy entrusted to her by a global collective of Indigenous elders, 4 guiding gifts that can help us remember the power of unity, guide us to transformation and wholeness, and enable us to live in deeper harmony with all of humanity. And honestly, what could be more current and relevant than what I've just read? Isn't that exactly what we need? So, Dr. Anita Sanchez, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's so good to have you here. And thank you for sharing your 10 best spiritual book list with us.
You're very welcome. It took me on a journey before we even had this conversation to sit quietly and remember what is still in my heart.
Yeah. So the 2 questions we always ask our guests, and many of them give the same answer. The first one is, what do books mean to you?
Oh, I will tell you, it's meant opening up a world, especially as a small child, being grown up in an economically poor situation, but also enduring different types of sexual and physical abuse. And so the world of books that my mother, she was a just avid reader. She worked all the time, but every moment she wasn't, she was reading a book. And I loved sitting next to her and just reading. So by age, I don't know, 3 or 4, I think it was 4 when I got my first library card. And I don't remember missing every 2 weeks, even in a storm, unless the library closed, my mother would take all of us kids and we'd go down to the library and check them out. So it opened up the possibility that I am not just my immediate circumstances. There are such possibilities out there.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think I had my first library card that early as well. And for me, books were just, they were just the most wonderful escape, but also the most wonderful opening,
Yeah.
to, as you say, to other possibilities, other worlds, other lives, other ways of living and being. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think they are so much more important than we realize, actually, because for some children, it's the only way that they will ever know that there is something else beyond what they're experiencing.
I agree with you. In my personal circumstance, it was books first and foremost, and then secondarily were the museums that were open for free.
Yeah.
Those are what I could go in then and visually see what I already was imagining when I read books, and know that, oh my gosh, I could feel the call. It really, books, the messages hit something really, I call it sacred, but I also believe everything is sacred. We don't always operate in sacred ways, act that way, but the books, those messages really touched me, that part of me that knew that it was true, the possibilities, the messages, the truth of what was being sent.
Mm. And our second question is, how easy or how challenging was it for you to compile your 10 best list?
It was, wow, I thought PhD was hard. Now, it wasn't quite like that, but nonetheless was like, are you kidding me? So I went through 3 rooms with just all these books and just sat there like, oh, and then I went, this isn't going to work. I went outside where the birds were chirping and stuff, and I just sat there and go, what is coming through now? Not having seen anything, but what is coming through? And that's what actually then helped me to come up with those authors and those books.
Mm. Well, your list was interesting to me because, I get to see all of them, and some of them are so similar. The same books keep coming up again and again. And they have every right to come up again and again because they're classics. But it's nice when I suddenly see other titles and I go, "Ooh, haven't read that one. I'm missing out here." So let's start with your number one, which I've heard a lot about, but I've never, for some reason, never read. The Color Purple by Alice Walker, which was published in 1982. When did you read that book?
I
And
read
tell
that
us.
in my 20s.
In your 20s.
And I was already well into a lot of my healing work. I had already left home and was already in my master's program. But I was really looking for, when I read that, it was like a lightning that showed me all the hardship that happened in this amazing culture, the Black folks' lives and abuse and all these things, but how just kept moving the will, the spirit to just persist, knowing there's something more. And of course, always drawing on community, on various kinds of connections, both internal to the sacred, but also to all the other people who truly care and love you as well as nature. So Alice Walker, then I began to learn more about her, and she's quite the writer and poet and activist that speaks out and shares her truth, at least appears very confidently. And yet in her writing, she showed the reality of all of it, the doubt and the journey and the struggle and the helps. And so it was just very real to me. And to this day, I want to, Sandie, at some point meet Alice Walker. It has not happened yet, but I just know that it will someday.
Put that intention out there. Now,
Yes.
I know that, you from an early age, you really wanted to do meaningful work, and you set your course accordingly. Did reading this book and this, pretty harrowing story, which, as you said, in some respects kind of echoed a little bit of your own story, did that do anything to change that trajectory or deepen your determination to move forward with that?
I think it deepened it. There was something, and even though it's very raw and a difficult kind of journey, it deepened that dream that I have had since I was 3 and 4 of what I was going to do when I grew up. The picture of the earth and all these stick people. And when I draw it, that's what they were, stick, different colors and sizes. And what was really amazing, I still have that dream, is that we have our hands on each other's hearts. And there's, I know there's millions of us. And so I didn't have any language back then, but by 20, I already began, and in my teens, starting to know it is truly, in a literal sense, connecting hearts all over the world. I just didn't know what that meant in terms of organization development, diversity, inclusion, all those other kinds of language. But at the core, at the foundation of that, this book, along with many of the others that are part of what just affirmed me moving forward, trusting in who I am and not dismissing the circumstances externally, never doing that. However, not allowing them to deny the truth of who I really am. So yes, I believe that that's true. She means a lot to me, and her sharing in such a deep way.
Mm-hmm. So book number 2, this is one that turns up a lot. You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Yet again, I think it's been on probably most lists.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, she reminds me, okay, now she's quite learned, and of course, millions and millions and millions of people know about her. I probably could say hundreds of millions. But she reminds me of my grandmother. And so my grandmother passed away when I was young, and I was already in my teens, but it felt so way too young. But she um, would show us when we had a headache, a certain plant we'd have, cinnamon, canela, just all these different coming out of her garden and what she dried, so that we would have anything that came up. It wasn't like, well, let's go to the drugstore to get pharmacy. And I'm not poo-pooing that. I'm just saying that we are provided through Mother Earth so much of what we need, including just more water. I remember saying my grandmother would just come over and put a glass of water in my hand and go sit, and you wait till you drink all the water, and do you feel better? I'm like, yeah. She was teaching us about just being dehydrated, right?
Mm.
So when I saw Louise's book, came upon it as so big for everyone, right? I began using, I still have that on my shelf. Actually, I put it over here because I wanted to be inspired as I was talking to you, filling these books nearby. Um, to be able to look and hear and see what you say, what part of the body that was connected to. And of course, in a much more detailed way, but at the same level, it makes me feel, I feel connected to my grandmother at the same time when I
Ah.
pick up Louise's book.
That's nice. I mean, everybody talks about how she's opened their eyes, to natural healing and our ability to heal, and the connection between our symptoms and emotions and state of mind. But this is the first time someone's talked about having such a personal connection
Yes,
to
I
the
think
book.
that's the indigenous wisdom, that aspect, because indigenous people who have stayed connected to the earth, then that's part of the original knowledge and information that gets passed on. And so I'm so happy for Louise to be able to touch so many lives, and so happy for my grandmother who continues to inspire and teach me about my own healing as I deal with my own journey.
Mm. So, book number 3, In the Spirit of Crazy Horse, the story of Leonard Peltier and the FBI's war on the American Indian movement, published in 1992.
Very powerful. Oh, especially at that time. At that point, I had already more than 15 years had been out working, doing diversity inclusion work, and finding I was in that place where most people at some point get where feeling like, no, this is feeling hopeless. I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard. I don't want to get into the beliefs of people and invite them to explore. It's too hard. And then this book came out, and just hearing how all these different viewpoints about what actually taking place, but what it really took me into deeper, as I've been so busy with other things, is back into my own heritage, my own indigenous background, and the Latina, the Mexican American part of me too, that weaves in that as well, to understand that we each can, at any moment, call on our ancestors' strength, their knowledge and awareness that I do believe is inside of us, to help us, because it may appear like this is the toughest time ever, and right now it does feel like the toughest time ever in the history of this planet. However, I still have the genes, the spirit, the knowledge encoded in me that I can draw on. And that book, of course, Crazy Horse is one of the major leaders with Indigenous people who, had vision, and so I remember, along with another author that I gave you, to remember that even when you're dealing with the difficulties and challenges, do that. It is not to transcend it. I do not believe that that is what we're meant to do, being here on this earth. However, we're also supposed to be able to draw on all of who we are, which is also the spiritual knowing, and that then gives us rise to the possibility of bringing back wholeness and unity. So the spirit of Crazy Horse, his life was amazing for the people, community unity, tried working with the settlers in peaceful ways, and of course eventually lost his own life. But he inspired so many by, no matter what was happening, no matter what was occurring, the many kinds of atrocities and that occurred in terms of the genocide of our people, there was that vision that spirit self gave to him that kept the people going. And I hope a little bit, I'm clearly not a crazy horse, what an amazing person, but I'm hoping a little bit of that spirit is coming through me from all my ancestors.
And into the work that you do, because I mean,
Yes.
you to read your bio, that doesn't really tell us. We get the big picture and the words, and they sound grand, but that doesn't tell us what you're doing on the ground. And I remember you've told me stories in interviews about, being on the ground and having, opposing groups in a workforce together that really aren't getting on with one another, and the cultural differences are not being understood, and how you actually bring them to a place of understanding of one
Thank
another.
you for saying that, because I do believe that's the wisdom of the elders coming through to me. So, in that, what you just suggested, what I did, which is different than some people, is oftentimes in my in my trainings, I will very safely, because we want to make sure safety, have candles lit inside of plates with water, so we make sure that everything's safe. And people often at first are like, "Why do we have candles? We've got the lights. What are we doing?" I will say, it's because to do this work of us really caring for each other across not just our similarities, but across these differences of race, gender, orientation, all these different ways, was going to require our higher selves to be present. So the candlelit is just a reminder to bring our higher selves to this work. Not only our feet are present, but all of it to do the work. And pretty much, Sandie, everyone, although at first there'll be some puzzled looks, and all of a sudden they'll settle into that. And it actually moves them. I've had leaders say, I sat there and I wasn't going to say this, but then I looked over at that candle, and it, again, they could feel the incongruency to who they really are and wanted to be in contribution. And it allowed that to come through.
Yeah.
So we have so much support around us in ways that our mind, our brain can get signal from images and things like light, like a lit candle or a
Yeah,
glass of water.
and you're going into corporations like Google. These are not small places, and you've got a different kind of mindset and culture, especially in a lot of the technology world today,
Yes,
and
well,
those kinds of companies
yes,
where
and
empathy is
yes.
not necessarily in abundance.
It's not, but some of them are really trying to shift. Hewlett Packard, I think we're seeing, and this is not an advertisement, but just seeing in the response to what's happening now, coming out very clearly, position of caring for their people and having meetings with their people, these luncheon things. What do you need? And just that, rather than what is happening with our bottom line. You see, and not that that doesn't matter, because you have to care about the bottom line to make sure these people have,
Yeah.
can feed their families. But there again, it's that spirit comes through. And in Singularity University, the Google, where I've spoken and stuff, is a bit puzzled at first. Like, are you a ringer or something? Are you coming in here with spirit or telling us stuff that's not technology? But at very quickly afterwards, they start realizing, oh, you're asking us to go inside and then connect with that knowledge of our wisdom of honoring him with dignity, who we each are. And actually, the feedback on that was really delightful. It stays in my mind, because at first there was a little pushback, and then it became, wow, we're even more effective teams than ever. We never thought that. We thought we were doing quite well, but then once we went into this other level of our connection, of our humanity, and then that awoke all the possibilities of us hearing each other to create and co-create what is needed in service to people.
Mm, wonderful. So number 4 is The Sacred Pipe, which was published in 1987, and that's Black Elk's account of the 7 rites of the Oglala Sioux, recorded and edited by Joseph Brown. Black
Yeah.
Elk, a most honored Indigenous elder, shares his original knowledge that comes from a deep connection to the earth spirit and the culture.
Yes. Black elk is, if not the one of the most honored of the elders, and because of the prophecy that I'm carrying, the eagle hoop prophecy, and many prophecies around the world, different traditions talk about the hoop and the oneness. And even though there was great hardship, of course, for the people, he's an Oglala Sioux, and still remains some clearly challenges that all of our tribes are dealing with, he just held on to that vision. And in the midst of some really horrific, um, just horrific kinds of massacres, and so I think what he does for me is help me to remember that we're more than what we're just seeing right here. And there's things that we can tap into in ourselves and between each other, but also part of that is also that vision to help compel us. Because if we stay stuck in the pain, and that's what I got in part from him, if we stay stuck in the pain, it's very easy as human beings for us to spiral downward. And and very rationally so, in terms of how horrific some of the things happening, what we're even seeing right now. At the same time, it doesn't serve us. It actually blinds us. It's an illusion of separateness to the wholeness that and what the reality we can be together. And so it's about healing, 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 and then moving forward, and having lots of support to do that. So Black Elk has even affected, I think, for most of North America, how we even describe the hoop of life. So we have 4 directions. And if you go south or in some other parts of the world, they'll say, in the east is the yellow direction. The people with the yellow, Asian keepers of the air. And in the south, they'll say is the red direction. However, it was from Black Elk who, from his visions and from his experiences and being just such an amazing visionary leader, that we honor him because he talked about the east where the sun rises as being the red direction. The people were the keepers of the earth. And that the yellow direction, which is just, none one is more honorific than the other, is just he changed the position. And in the south is the yellow direction. And these are the people who are the keepers of the air, oxygen that all life needs. And then, of course, we continue around with the west, the black direction, the keepers of the water. And we know water is sacred, water is life. And the great diaspora of the Black people, on much of which was horrific under slavery, all over the world, nonetheless, the keepers of the water. And in the north, the white direction, the white people, they're the keepers of the fire. And we know fire can transform things. It's, again, energy that's so important to make a land fertile, to create new ideas and technologies and things. So all of this hoop of life as Black Elk to everyone. And that's part of what I really love about the indigenous wisdom keepers, is because it's some of the few cultural people outside of spiritual leaders, because they're also spiritual leaders, that see as one human race, one humanity, one hoop of life. So honor the differences, but also acknowledge that we are so intimately connected that we know now that something happening halfway around the world is affecting us, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to be mindful about what it is we think and what it is we do, our actions, because it all has an impact.
So the sacred pipe, I mean, he was the keeper of the sacred pipe. Is the sacred pipe a metaphor? I mean, what is the significance of it?
Yeah. The sacred pipe for some is a metaphor and very powerful one, but for indigenous people, it's far more than that. For us to have a pipe means you go through a whole process of visions to be a keeper of a pipe. But even if you're never a keeper of pipe, I remember a young being taught, the pipe being stone. And again, everything is a relation. So I had the stone people, the stone nation, and and that's a female, the stone, and then the wood, the plant people, and that's the pipe stem, and you put those together, and then that's the female and the male. So everything just keeps showing more and more connection, and then the tobacco that goes into the pipe, again, the plant. And then when you light this with the wholeness of all of this, the smoke that goes is the remembering of that we're all part of spirit and the connection. And various tribes go into far more detail about all this, but it is a part of a knowing, of remembering of who we are and our connection to all our relations, both the two-leggeds as well as all the elements in nature, and earth, all beings.
Mm. Book number 5, you have a personal story to share here. So I will invite you to share it. The Book of Joy, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World, the Dalai Lama with Desmond Tutu, which was published in 2016. What was it about that book that really touched you so much?
Well, sometimes people will say when they hear some of my story and that, they'll just be like shaking their head like, we can't believe that you're so upbeat. And so, like, did you drink something? And I'm like, yeah, water. It's really good. But it's the joy. it's the understanding that I experienced in my life, that joy is always here. That actually is a part of who we're supposed to be, and that the suffering also exists. So it will always have some suffering. Part of what we want, because it tells us when something's not working. It tells us when we have, as Louise Hayes says, there's a problem in our body we need to take care of, or a problem in the larger society or around the world. Right, the earth telling us, in this pause, seeing clean air in places that have been so polluted is amazing. But in my own life, just this whole thing of being joyful, there was a time when I wasn't. There was a time when I forgot. At age 13, having my father just being murdered, race related issue, that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time and mistaken for a black man, and a white man returned and killed him on the spot. And then also the abuse that I had endured, and then believing that now the person was gone, I didn't have to deal with this anymore. But the images in my mind continued. So I forgot the joy, and I tried to take my life as a teenager, which is happening way too often. It's on its rise. So more and more important for me to speak out. And what I do know is there's nothing glamorous about that process. It was horrific. I still remember giving up hope and losing hope in such a way that, in spite of all these amazing people around me and the breath and the ability to learn and all the things, I'd forgotten all that. So I tried, and luckily it didn't work. I got a very clear message. I needed to be here. So with all the physical writhing and all the stuff that happened, I was just pleading, please let me stay. And in that moment, I realized that I will not forget again. I'm human, so I could drop into some forgettingfulness, but never to that level, because it's always about joy. And so dancing, and I dance. I love to dance. I love to chant. And this book and the Dalai Lama, I just love it. And his humanness. So even in his joy, I remember one of the things the Dalai Lama said was, he even still has work to do, because, he's so filled of joy and compassion, but he hasn't had that much compassion yet for bed bugs. And I thought, well, if he can say that, then I can keep going. I'm inspired.
Tell us your personal story about Desmond Tutu.
Oh, Desmond Tutu, that was such a beautiful thing in the mid 90s, where at that point I've already been doing lots of diversity and inclusion work, bringing together. I remember exactly when he came in. We were doing work with AT&T, executives of DuPont, and Digital Equipment Corps, and we would bring them together. And for 5 full days, which is unheard of now, but back then they would be residential, 5 full days. And we're in the heat of this race work, and people are confused, and some don't want to hear, and there's anger, there's all of it, it's all present, it's real. And then, unbeknownst to us, my colleague had run into Desmond Tutu early that morning. He was staying in the same hotel, and he agreed to stop in. So before he even got the door, I swear, in great love, people's faces started turning towards the door. This tiny man with huge spirit and energy walks in, and everyone stood up. And it was Desmond Tutu. And he spoke to us for about 7 minutes, and everybody was amazed. And we went out with him, a couple of us who were doing the training. And he said to us, and I'll never forget it, he said, "This is really good. You've been doing reconciliation work. You've been doing this work for a long time." And with a twinkle in his eye, right before he walked away, he said, "So what's next?" And he walked away. And with that, there was this pause, and I remember taking a deep breath, and I just smiled. I go, it might not be the answer, but my answer to that in that moment, and still is we get to love each other. We get to co-create together. We get to be in unity and family together. Oh, it's so much can happen in healing the wounds and really looking at them and reconciling and changing systems and structures that are set in this woundedness, in this oppressive stuff, and freeing all of us, both the oppressed and the oppressor, so that we can co-create together and dream together. And so that's that's a big part of what gives me joy, is that I actually get to be a part of facilitating that process, or putting the mirror on that process, so that people don't forget that joy is the place for it to be, whether we're talking about at home or in the workplace or out in the community. Joy is ours.
Yeah, and there's a huge dearth of joy in the world at the moment, so we need to find it again.
We do. We need to remember,
Mm.
and we're seeing some. It's hard to see when, in the midst of all the incredible pain and hurt, or the dismissal. Sometimes it's even the silence. Particularly as a person of color, I think the silence sometimes, which I love silence, because silence is full, but when you want people to speak out, but we're seeing so much of people really responding to each other. I know many people, it's not about joining in the protests, that may not be for them, but I even had neighbors who were getting food. I'm like, that's a lot of food. What do you go? I'm going to go leave the food for the protesters, for the peaceful protesters, because this is important. Or what we just recently saw, I hope you saw this, to be hopeful about. It came out a couple of weeks ago, 200 years ago, during the Irish famine, the great suffering, the starvation that was happening. The Navajo and I can't remember the other tribe was. There were two tribes that together raised $170, and they sent it to Ireland to help the people. And a couple of weeks ago, from Ireland came a check for $1.8 million. Yes. And I know I'll think about it sometime, the other tribe, because it's so important. But because the tribes, the Dene people and other tribes, the disparities are so real. The culturally rich, so I don't want to talk about poverty in that way, but in terms of lack of health, lack of fresh water, food deserts. So here the Irish sent $1.8 million later, which tells me hope is alive. Because to have love endure like that for 200 years, we're here, right? So it's going to keep on.
That reminds me of a story, another story similar. I mean, this particular one is very, very poignant. But I think that, one group of people, disparate, nothing in common, helping another group of people is really what it's all about. But there's a movie, it came out about 4 or 5 years ago. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Oh, it's called Pride. It is available on Netflix, and it's a true story. And it's got an actor called Bill Nighy, who I happen to really love. It's a quintessential English movie, English humor, and English story. But back in the 80s, I think it was, Margaret Thatcher was hell-bent on breaking up the unions. And she started with the coal miners. And, you've got a lot of coal mines in Wales, or you had, and she was really doing everything, had the police out on the streets, a kind of, microcosmic version of what's been happening recently. And the miners were being starved. They wanted to starve them so that they would go back to work and just, leave the union. And they wouldn't. They had this strong belief in the union and, looking after the collective. And there were a group of gay guys in South London. You couldn't get more further apart than the Welsh miners and these gay guys in South London, who decided that they were going to raise money and send it to them. Wow. And they did. And they actually went to visit them. And these miners, these big, strong, masculine guys, were a bit perplexed to see all of these gay guys in their joy and their brightness and, their great senses of humor turning up among them. But they actually ended up developing a great friendship. Yes. And some years later, I think it might have been one of the first Pride marches in England. These gay guys and, the gay community were doing something in Hyde Park, and there was a lot of, the press were against it and a lot of bad publicity. And all of a sudden, up come all of these buses filled with these miners who'd come to support them.
Oh,
and given them the heart to keep going. And it's this kind of coming together, where black and white, red and yellow, it doesn't matter. The differences really don't matter, do they?
yeah. Well, we know that it's only what, it's a 0.5% of our DNA that's different. And so I don't want to deny the difference. I think they're beautiful. I don't think we say grandmother, grandfather, make no mistake. In the different places in the earth where we grew, where we were born, it made a difference in terms of the color of our skin, and rightly so, for us to be able to survive and be in
Yeah,
healthy relationship. But all the judgment about what's good, bad, higher, less, all of that, my hope is that we're by putting the spotlight on it again, we'll be able to shift some of those beliefs again and the systems and structures in place. But thank you for that story. It's so beautiful. I'll have to watch that movie. And as you were saying that, all of a sudden, I remembered the Choctaw. So I believe the Choctaw and the Navajo, the Dene people, and the Irish people are forever have this love thing going.
yes,
And we actually all do if we give it a chance to just be still enough and open our hearts. Then it's going to be there. It's going to
yeah.
be there.
Yeah, we need to reach out to one another more. I don't know if this happens in other countries. I wasn't aware of it when I lived in America, but England, it's been going for years, where towns twin with another town and often it's France or Germany or Italy or Europe, somewhere not too far away. But I was driving through the villages one day where I live now, and I saw that one of the towns was twinned with a town in Tibet. And I thought, oh, how wonderful, because then they have cultural exchange. They have, the kids come back and forth and they get to experience, a completely different culture. So I think we should do more of that. Let's
Absolutely.
understand one another.
It'll enrich our lives. That's just it. When we think you're doing it for someone else, you're actually, that's great, because giving does, we know just even biologically, endorphins start running when you give and that, and you build understanding, but it does so much for you as well as for them. So I think that's our natural place. None of us do, it's, it's an illusion to think we do anything alone. I'm not even breathing alone. People, well, I'm here, I'm breathing. Yeah, but I'm looking out the window here and all these trees that convert the carbon that I put out into oxygen for me to breathe. Thank you, trees. Thank you, plants, for that. And my mother and my father who had me. And all, it's just on and on and on. The food I eat, the water I drink, nothing is alone. And then you add in all the two-leggeds, all of our relatives. Um, there's so much to be grateful for. And we need that energy in correcting systems and structures that don't honor that, don't treat all with dignity. But it's coming from that place of what we want in the vision, rather than out of anger and revenge and more hurt and that. So it's totally understandable. However, for us to really get to what we want, a thriving, just world for all of us, for all beings, not just two-legged, so the earth itself, it's going to require that. We have that capacity. We've seen
We
a lot
do.
of them. Thanks for that story too. I'm definitely going to look at Pride.
Yeah, it's a fun film. Book number 6, The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho, 1995, a Toltec wisdom book. That's doesn't come up as much as I thought it would, actually, but it is a classic.
It is. And I think part of it came up in my life. And then again, at that point, the Eagle Hoop had just come in that spring into my life. And it gave me a recharge, a hope that, wait a minute, I don't have to leave doing what I'm doing. Being reminded that I may see and sense and feel things that others may not see as readily, but that doesn't make them wrong. Again, that's part of following your spirit, your purpose, and going forward. And I think that reading his work and stuff is understanding how things seem so separate and so different, that when you put them together, that something new gets created. And so with his book was interesting. What came to me at that time, and comes up again, is that the whole notion of forgiveness, forgiving the unforgivable, and um, not, you've already heard enough in terms of what I needed to forgive, but as going through that journey and coming to like a deep, deep, deep forgiveness, um, of the pain from abuse and the murder of my father, forgiving the white man and his wife who said such horrific things afterwards about Black people. By the forgiving actually created more of my humanity, and that alchemy created a whole process of another level. It was like a lightning bolt jolt of post-traumatic growth, which just got coined sometime later in the 80s. But it was his book that then spurred on me looking at post-traumatic growth. So we already had the beginnings of positive psychology and positive about health. Like, why do we keep studying just sickness? Yes, we got to study, but let's also study health. Let's study what positive well-being looks like. And that his whole being and messages just spurred on that post-traumatic growth. So never saying, oh, you want people to go through just horrific experiences so they can have post-traumatic growth. But what it did help spotlight is that, why is it that people can go through such horrible, difficult, challenging, physically, mental, spiritual kinds of pain and huge whole groups of people and still come out with this energy to transform, to make whole, to not only for themselves but for other groups of people. And we've had that throughout history, and we're having it again. It is here again. So thank you again for having me look at what is coming through, because Paulo Coelho's work and The Alchemist really, to me, brings so what is happening, and to pay attention and what is needed at this time.
Mm-hmm. Number 7, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Mindfulness Essentials series, which is a series of books on how to sit, how to eat, how to walk, how to love, how to relax. What was it about this particular series that impacted you?
Because it felt, an indigenous perspective is that we each get to choose every moment and every breath, even when we're sleeping, to be good medicine or bad medicine. And good medicine is anyone or anything that puts into alignment the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. And bad medicine is anything that takes out of alignment the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. And so Thich Nhat Hanh's work, what I loved about it was so holistic. It was so about everything being connected and moving. And he remains with me because I've not met him either. He's another one. I would love to meet him in this plane, if not the other. But he, every morning and every evening, now I do my practice 3 times a day because it seems essential for me to stay present. Thich Nhat Hanh, I do a walking meditation every morning as part of my practice. And in that meditation, I not only sing my chant from the wind and with some of the blessings from the Seneca people, but I also, one of the walking meditations of Thich Nhat Hanh, where he talks about giving gratitude and thanks for, you've given me water for my seeds, gratitude for the seeds that you've watered. And in return, I'm going to put water on the seeds of others. And I'm getting the words a little off because I'm used to walking and singing it, so I'm not used to speaking it. But so Thich Nhat Hanh and his being mindful to what is, and to pause. And I love that about the elders, because we would sit. As a little girl, I remember as early as 3, just sitting for the longest time. But it wasn't like an eagle just flew by the window. I remember sitting for the longest time, and it wasn't punishment. So if you have to go bathroom, you could get up and leave. It wasn't like, but you didn't want to leave, because the elders would share stories about the people and about us, and they were beautiful and heroic, and how they saw the rainbow and even struggles, but how we're here, and that even in those kinds of circumstances where settlers came and tried to, in different parts of the world, to genocide, to annihilate us, and we're here. They forgot we're seeds. It makes me so smiling. So when I hear whatever direction the stuff, it's like, yeah, but just remember your seeds. We're all seeds. We're all, we're going to keep going. So just remember that in the midst of this other, I realize, but to just keep remembering. So the pause, to be silent, to listen with the softest part of your ear and with the expanding heart. It's not a challenge to listen. It's actually becomes, what I will say, Sandie, is I've learned to crave the silence and listening. But it's something. People think it's nothing. It is something. To be totally present, it's a wonderful thing. And Thich Nhat Hanh, he's the guy. He's the man in his book that just brings that and is with me every day in my practice.
Good. I'm going to have to look at that. So number 8, this one comes up a lot, as much as Louise Hay, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yes. Yes. And for a really short time, he and I were members of the Transformational Leadership Council. One meeting, when I came in, he was there, and I was just so awed by him and his brilliance. And of course, he's a fluent Spanish speaker, a little bit of English. His English has gotten better and better since then. But my Spanish is not that good. And so I just remember smiling and sitting by him and just loving his work. But he also, and even with my publisher, they remind me that, so his 4 agreements are so powerful. The essential truth that are just understood all over the world, of course, who read his book. But it took 7 to 8 years, a slow trajectory, for that book to be really held by so many people. Very, very low, kind of slow growth. And then it just went. And I know when I did my talk, and then I was approached by a publisher of Simon & Schuster that they wanted my book, I kind of was like, I just gave a talk on this egohood prophecy and the 4 gifts. And they said, no, we want your book. And I remember then my publisher told me, don't be discouraged if people don't learn about these messages right away. We really believe yours will be like Don Miguel Ruiz's, a very slow, long trajectory, and then we'll go up because people will realize they need these messages. And that's the heart with which you wrote it, was to share these gifts that people already have, and they just need to remember to use them. So his 4 agreements, I just love them. I have his book over here. I just, and I know everybody knows it, but just, be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. I mean, that's just it. Wisdom, more often than not, is simple, but so true, and not necessarily easy to live by, but so simple. So just, keep going. And I so appreciate him and his work. And in some ways too, him being a man of color and from Mexico, as my ancestors are, as I am, I think it does give me, just physically, to be able to see someone who looks like you. It also can inspire you in another way too, that perhaps others who also lift you up and inspire you, but there's a little bit of difference, that it's not a total, but in the spirit place, it's like that with so many, all these books that I suggested.
Well, I love the fact that this one comes up so often, because each time it comes up, it's a wonderful reminder to me. And they're coming up so often lately, I clearly need to hear them. And it always makes me think about, some kind of fairy tale where, the young girl or the young boy has got their thing over their shoulder and they're going off into the world, and the wisdom, if you gave them these 4 sentences, to live their life by, that's all they would need.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, I love that simplicity. So number 9 is The Shaman Within, a physicist's guide to the deeper dimensions of your life, the universe, and everything, by, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, Claude, but I know he's a friend of yours.
It's Poncelet.
Poncelet.
Yeah, he's Belgium. Yes. A dear friend. Oh my gosh. He passed away a couple of years ago now. But during his lifetime, the latter part, I began getting involved in the Pachamama Alliance in 2005. And their whole mission is to support the preservation of the Amazon rainforests and the cultures, the people who are there, for it's the lungs of our earth. And we all know a lot more about that now with the fires that have burned. And Claude was a guide, he and his wife, for Pachamama Alliance, taking people to Amazon. And so am I and my husband, guides. And he taught us at first, when we first started out, like how he was there. And he actually always honoring the indigenous people there. So not taken away. We have so much to learn from the Ashwar and the Sapara and the other indigenous people who really understand dream time and waking time, and so big and full of being in right relationship with the earth. They don't live on the earth. They're part of the rainforest when they talk about it, how they behave. So he and I had the greatest time when he was writing this book. He gave me the honor of sending me different pieces of it at a time and to give him feedback. And we'd have the best time because I would go, well, this is what I learned on this. So this is a little bit different on this. Wow, that's really cool. This is what you learned from, the North, from the European, the indigenous people. And then, of course, in your expanded, this is what I learned. And so we just had the best time. And I loved, he actually, already by that time, I was weaving indigenous wisdom and science together and working with companies, corporations, and leaders. But he opened it up to a whole another level of confidence for me. Because here is this amazing nuclear physicist who also does shamanic practice and honored the shaman, the spirit within everyone, and spoke of that in companies, in the UN, and all over. And so I was like, well, he's asking me for my opinion. Then who am I to deny sharing, inviting the gift, not imposing it on somebody, but inviting that. And so he has a special place in my heart. And he and his wife, Noelle, and I are still very good friends in his family. And yes, it's a really good book. It's a very good book. Very practical tools for understanding that part of ourselves that's not known by the five senses, but is further in making that more real and concrete for us.
So number 10, this is the first time this book's come up. And when I tell you who it's written by, people might be surprised. What I Know for Sure by Oprah Winfrey. That came out in 2014. What is it that Oprah had to say that touched you?
It's what Oprah's had to say for decades. So I'm one of those many people who, when the recorder, just put on the recorder, chime it, and because I'd be working so that on the weekends I could listen to them. And sometimes my husband and my sons would listen. A lot of times they go, oh gosh, she's on again. And I'm like, no, what she inspires for me, first of all, she reawakens. What part of why I do my work is I really choose to be with people of all different races and cultures. However, my early years, from age 5 to 16, when I went away for college, we were one of the only non-Black families in my neighborhood. We were the first non-white family in my neighborhood when we moved there, when I think I just was about to turn 6. And then immediately people scattered. The white people left. We had ruined the neighborhood. And then who would move in were black people in East Kansas City. And so I grew up running into each other's houses, Black families' houses, and they were my family. They'd get after us if we did something that was silly and wrong and not thoughtful and kind. They would share with us. Mr. Smith would walk us down to the Dairy Queen when my mother couldn't take us down there, and we just really needed to spend that nickel that we had to get an ice cream. So I got to very early learn to appreciate people from the Black direction, African American people. And it was also during in the 60s, a lot of the race and all of this stuff happening. And so those things that were happening when the police would come in and be shooting and Black Panthers there, and We were in the heart in Kansas City of the Black neighborhood, and um, I just love these people, and as I love everyone in the Hoopa life, but I got to learn that at an early age. So when Oprah is there in all her curiosity, her smarts, but also just hungry to spotlight wisdom keepers, healers, thought leaders, and only over the years have grown more and more full and confident, and who can see, I can sense, I can feel the integration of that. And I don't know Oprah, maybe she's another one day. You're hearing a few of the people that I want to meet them one day. um, uh, Actually, I met her partner a few months ago, Stedman. He was speaking at a thing, so what a wonderful man, and obviously would have to be, and happiness to both of them. Um, but she, I still turn her on and listen to her. In fact, last night I was about to go to sleep. I was so tired, and I happened to turn on the TV. Actually, I was about to turn off it and switch channels, and there she was with a panel of people talking about what's going on. So what I love about her is her honesty and her knowing that it's spirit, that we're in these bodies, we chose to be here, we have to be present to the here and now and be contributing force. And we're more than just what you see. And so she inspires me and that work. And so as a woman of color, uh, to all the Oprahs that have known and some will never be known, I just so love them and appreciate them not only doing their own personal journey work, but like her, bringing forward for others to see. So Sandra, you're doing it from the white direction. You're bringing forward some spiritual leaders who are very well known and others who are not. But you are like, with no BS, let's get forward, let's move forward, because this is what is being called for at this time from inside deep of each one of us, as well as from the earth itself. And clearly we're seeing it on the systems and structures, whether we're talking political or economic, agriculture, whatever it is, socially, it's so needed. So I just honor Oprah. And um, some days, especially lately, I'm getting so many calls, so much pain. And so I'm always show up as such a big yes. And I feel like Oprah's like that. It's like, um, if my burden is to share these wonderful gifts, oh my gosh, who am I to complain, right? To share the possibility of the life that I started with, which was powerfully beautiful with all the indigenous and the Latino, the Mexican American richness, but right beside it the other. So it's just ending this duality of like, it's either this or that. Rather, we need to walk and hold and see all of it and move forward toward the vision that we know that we all are worthy of. And Oprah is sort of, she's an icon of that for me.
Yeah. Um, I don't often, I'm sharing a lot, I'm speaking a lot more today than I normally speak, sharing a lot of stories, but I have a story about Oprah that, I used to watch her years and years ago. I mean, I'm going back 25 years or more, 30 years. And I remember watching a TV program that she did, which just, my chin was on the floor. It made such a big impact on me. She did one of her usual programs back in the day when she had, her normal show. And she had her audience segregated. And she had all of the white people herded into one room, the green room, before they went on, live, and all the black people in another. And she had all the white people herded into a room with hardly, they had to stand, they didn't have any food, there were no niceties, they were treated roughly by everybody, and they all got really annoyed. And she did just the opposite with the black people. And when she actually started the show, she told the audience what she'd done. And she said to the white people, "How did you feel?" And they said, "Oh, it was awful. We were treated so badly." And she said to the black people, "And how did you feel?" And they said, "Wow, we were treated with such kindness and generosity and respect. And she was trying to show each of them how the other normally experiences life, how they are normally treated and perceived. And I remember, and the white people were very annoyed, of course. And suddenly they got it and they began to understand, because we do not know what it is like to be treated like others are treated. And I just thought, what a brave thing for her to do. And I wondered whether it might get her into trouble, with her network or her producers, because she really did make the white people really angry. But I thought that was a fabulous thing to do.
Very.
So I've liked Oprah ever since.
Yes, absolutely. And we're seeing that now. I think that with the video and the murder of George Floyd, actually the public execution, I'm hearing from lots of people like, we knew it was bad, but we didn't realize it's gotten to this. And yet there's so many patterns as people color that we know exists. And clearly the darker your skin, the more difficult it is. But even with my sons who look more Latino than than uh, than my husband, who is white, I had to teach them the things that they need to do when faced with police or crowds of people, how to keep themselves safe. That I know their friends, their white friends, hadn't, but people don't know that. So now that we know, this is the call to action, with our hearts expanding, with curiosity to listen and learn more, and then to be in collective positive action to make the changes, so that way we can all be honored. Because I'm sure that was hard for Oprah to do that to her guests, because she's quite the hostess, right? But
Yes.
she knew that this was going to be a benefit. And I know that from the diversity inclusion work. I've done the separating circles and different things, always with love and intention of, and people just say, thank you. That was the most powerful thing for me to understand. I don't know if I would get it unless I actually got it somatically,
Yeah.
not just as a thought, but as it really at every level to get it. But holding the container, always knowing, as I'm sure everyone was safe.
Yes.
No one was going to be hurt in that
Yes.
process. And so I think we're in that time now in a global way of being awakened. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I'm the first, but I'm so glad that that you got to have me speak about Oprah and bring up that memory for you, because we have to acknowledge the leaders of every direction, of every color, of every race, of every gender, of every orientation. And I can go on and on with the list at this point, because um, we have to honor the similarities and the differences and support each other.
Yeah. And I love the description, the people from the yellow direction or the black direction. I think that it takes a lot of the heat. I mean, language becomes so loaded. There are so many, so much energy put into words, and, misdirections. I think it's time for new descriptions.
Yeah.
And, we're all just from a different direction.
Well, we're
That's
from
it.
a different direction.
But the
And
same planet.
so when you think of that hoop, if you, as a white person, if white people are gone, the hoop would be broken.
Yeah.
Well, the hoop would hold. So if we don't have the black people, the African Americans, and the black direction would be gone.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I think is misunderstood, that hopefully is getting understood now, is the whole notion of Black Lives Matter. And I hear often people say, why don't they say Black Lives Matter? Why don't they just say all lives matter? And I said, we just calm down, listen, all lives matter. What does that mean? Well, that means all our lives. And I said, yes. So for all lives to matter means we must embrace Black Lives Matter. And people all of a sudden go, well, I didn't think of it that way. I said, yeah, because it's our brain and our safety mechanisms think, oh, I'm going to be gone if we're just talking about Black people. No, what we're talking about is all the lives. So all this hoop of life. And I thank you for honoring the hoop. We need all of this. We need every one of us, or the hoop will be broken. And I fear what will happen long term, in terms of having this wonderful experience being a human being for our children and our children's children, and this children of other species too.
Yeah. So, of all your 10 books, if you had somebody that you dearly love who's setting out on their path in life and looking for a really good book to guide them, which of the 10 would you give them?
Oh, that is so hard. That is so hard. Ah, I love them all. They were tough questions. She's been a tough host today, hostess here. I think I would say, only because, again, in honoring the hoop, I would love people to learn more about the red direction. So read any and all of these books, but I probably would choose, it's either The Sacred Pipe or The Spirit of Crazy Horse. To ask an indigenous person to choose between Crazy Horse and Black Elk, that's like, I don't know. But I think I would choose one of them, but not putting it over one or the other, but
No.
right in this circle of the 10, that what I am making up a story that people probably know least about the indigenous direction. And so that's why I would bring forward that understanding. And there's so much, even the UN talks about now in their papers, that's so essential to learn from indigenous leaders, because we have a knowledge that we kept over the millennium of our connection to the earth and what it means to be a whole human being. And we've actually preserved the most biodiverse places in the world. 85% of them, indigenous people are on that. So we have things to learn. So in that spirit, I would say read The Sacred Pipe and
Okay.
then read Crazy Horse.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now you gave us some keywords that describe you that are on your 10 best page: messenger, wisdom keeper, bridge builder, traveler, dancer. I want one more from you, something that really gives us an insight into who Anita is at her heart. So maybe something a little bit quirky, whimsical, something that perhaps your partner or your best friend knows about you and might, divulge. What would it be?
Oh, this is going to be really silly.
Good.
Okay. In my early teen years, in order to make money, my boyfriend at that time, he tried to teach me to be a pool shark. And I actually did make a little bit of money because I was so like, yeah, sure, she can play. And they'd been drinking. I wasn't drinking. I could just play pool. So a part of me was one day, many years from now, maybe in this office of mine, I'll put in a pool table, and I will embarrass myself by how bad I am, but have some fun playing, and then maybe invite my grandchildren. I have no grandchildren, but I have many grandchildren at the same time, to play so that I can have fun being a pool shark.
I think that's wonderful and very, very inventive. Can I add that to your page? Or
It's a wannabe pool shark.
wannabe pool shark.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to write that down right now and not forget it, because I love it when we get these little insights into people.
Yeah.
We get to know the CV, we get to know what they do in the world, but I just want to know who are you, and that little part of you that,
There's a mischievous part, definitely.
Good. Okay, so now we have gone through everything on my list. I've got one more thing I want to tell people about, but before we do that, I want to open it up to anybody who's got any questions or anything to say to you. So, Sharon, do we have anyone who wants to pose a question to Anita?
We do. Let's see. Frances Mary said, I absolutely love this conversation. Anita's joy, wisdom, passion, and positivity just pours from her heart. And I am so grateful to be here in her presence. I have been and am very connected to the Native American community, which started back in the early 90s when I was given a book during a dream which was called Indian Givers: How the Indians of the Americas Transformed the World by Jack Weatherford. I mentioned this to my first Native American friend, who said, "That's a real book, and we have it in our store." That experience started a deep spiritual journey that continues to bring out more of who I really am. Thank you for this Wisdom Keepers interview so very much. Love to all.
Thank you. It's on my shelf. I looked at it and I used it in my classes in the past. And what's wonderful in that book is he goes through different sections: leadership, community, and just gives enough information. So hopefully it makes you curious, as it did Mary Frances, to keep going and learning more. We need to feed our curiosity, to fall in love with each other.
Yes, yes, we do. Your book, The Four Sacred Gifts, just say a little bit about that and tell us what those four gifts are.
Yes. The four sacred gifts come from a prophecy. It's called the Egohoop prophecy that came about back in the early 90s, that said that Spirit told Don Coyes, a Mohican elder and founder of White Bison, that we were in a great wintertime and that the harmony has been lost because human beings have forgotten how to be in healthy relationship with themselves, with other human beings, with nature, with the earth itself. And that there was to be a call out, and 27 elders from around the world came. And as the vision, the dream, the prophecy came, they built a hoop and they hung 100 eagle feathers from it. And at the end of that weekend, when they were together singing prayer, there was no arguments. They had different languages, and they created this, and they put four gifts in there for all humankind, from all the different hoops, the different directions, to use to remember how to bring back harmony, how to be in healthy relationship with yourself and others. So very quickly, the four gifts that were put in there that belong to all of us is the first: the power to forgive the unforgivable. The second, the power of unity. The third gift, the power of healing. And the fourth gift is the power of hope in action. Use these four gifts: forgiveness, unity, healing, and hope. And you will remember how to be in healthy relationship with yourself, other people, and the earth itself. And we can restore harmony. And those are the messages that I've been blessed, along with many others, and Don Coyes and everyone, to go out and give these all over the world. And everywhere I've gone, Sandie, it's so wonderful. It doesn't matter where I am in the world, whether it's Kyrgyzstan, I was recently last year, or Scotland and other places, people would stop, in Asia, stop, and they would write down the four gifts. And it's just,
well, it's like the four agreements, isn't it? And
yes.
As you're speaking, I mean, unity is a word that I've heard again and again and again over the last week. People that I've been interviewing, people who are presenting seminars, it seems as though this is the word for this time. And I think that those four gifts are so timely. I mean, they really should be, if there's going to be like a rallying cry, for what is going on right now, it should be those four gifts.
Yes, I think they are essential. And I think whenever we hit true wisdom, the real truth, it rings through. And the thing that I will say from speaking and all over the world, and of course now more doing it virtually, is that what is drawing us is unity and hope. Let your heart knows, draw to what you want to draw. But let me also say, from my experience on my own life and also working with leaders, is that we can have the biggest visions, we can have the greatest intentions and hope, and we must. And they will be bigger and even more possible to attain if we continue to do our own healing and our own forgiveness. So these are said separately, but they're intimately interconnected, and they are gifts for our time.
They are indeed. So there's an event starting on June the 20th. Would you like to share that with us and how we might be able to participate?
Yes, everyone's invited. It's World Unity Week. Unity Earth, and dozens and probably it's hundreds now of other organizations are part of this. And it starts on June 20th and goes to the 27th. It'll be amazing speakers and things, all talking about unity and hope and dealing with the real stuff and how do we move forward together. But on the 20th is something that I've been able to participate in, gathering Indigenous elders, healers, that we will be starting in Australia with the Aboriginal aunties and grandmothers and moving westward in a 24-hour period, sharing blessings ceremony all the way around the earth, 24-hour period on solstice, ending up in Hawaii with the Indigenous elders there. So doesn't that make you smile? You can see smiling. It's just, we need these blessings and bringing these different traditions and the good medicine in such a way and sharing with everyone. So please, I think if you go to worldunityweek.org or Unity Earth, I think worldunityweek.org, you'll be able to learn more about that and sign up and learn all the different workshops and things. It's all these volunteers are putting this together, and the response from the Indigenous elders. Just today, I got from the chief, Chuck, and I just lost his last name, from the Cherokee Nation, and he's, yes. And that's what's happening. Yes, because the reality is our Indigenous elders have been in ceremony for all of us, for all life, and holding the hoop. So it'll just be so needed at this time. And I'm very, very, very happy to share that with all of your viewers and listeners, to please and tell other people about it.
So is this all being documented? Is it being filmed?
Yes. So what's happening is, well, some ceremonies will not be filmed. And so the elders will say, but what is being pre-recorded is 2 and 3 minute blessings coming in the various languages, in the various, from all different traditions around the world. But there is going to be some live things that we'll be able to shoot by Zoom too. So I don't know all the details of that. Thank goodness I'm not taking care of that part. I just get the great honor of working with Unity Earth and Phil Lane Jr. and gathering and inviting these amazing elders to share their blessings for all of us.
Would you just give us the websites again?
Yes. worldunityweek.org or unityearth.org.
Okay. Wow. Well, this has been an absolutely delightful experience. You know, for me, creating the book club, inviting people like you to share with us the books that were so meaningful, you know, provides a wonderful kind of guidebook for others. You know, it's a list that will incite others to want to, you know, be curious and learn more. And that's a great gift, I think, to people who are on their spiritual path. But even better than that is being able to speak with people like you about your journey and your life, and really hear not just, you know, the words on a page, which is impactful in its own right, but to feel the energy behind that when we get to speak like this. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
And thank you. It's a gift to go on this journey with you on this. It really has enlivened things in me. So thank you too, and gratitude as well.
Thank you, Anita. And if you would like to experience more of Dr. Anita Sanchez's work, you can visit her website at anita-sanchez.com, and do check out forsacredgifts.com and read the book, because I recall this book made such an impact on me when I read it, probably about 18 months ago, 2 years maybe, that I did something that I don't normally do. It's not that common for me to do it, and said, right, I need to get you on another show straight away so that we can continue the conversation. So I'm constantly finding ways to have conversations with you, Anita. This won't be the last.
Good. I'm glad to know that.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to everybody as well for spending the time with us today. And we'll be back with more next week at the same time.